Hello and welcome to Susie B. Living's Gardening by the Moon series. So we've reached the end of April already, and I think that next week we might be getting a little bit of spring weather up here in Lincolnshire. Actually, the whole of UK, because the UK has really been struggling this year with cold and with wet. So I hope it's nice where you are around the world, wherever you may be. But I think things are looking up. So let's start. It's Sunday evening. It is the 28th of April already, and I'm going to start you with Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week. Wednesday, we come to May already. Let's start with what I will be doing for my moon phase schedule. Well, I'll try and do as much as I possibly can. But like I said to you, don't freak out and feel as though, you're under pressure to do all of this stuff. Just make a priority of sowing. That's the only thing that I say. Make a priority of sowing. And anything else that comes along with it is a bonus as well. I did another talk the other night, and we were talking about moon gardening, and a lot of people were interested, and then I had quite a few skeptics, and that was quite interesting because I love having skeptics, because I feel that if you've got questions, then it always gets me excited, because I always think, try something once, and if it doesn't work, then try something else. So for all you skeptics out there, welcome aboard. Okay, let's start. So we're talking about Monday. I'm just looking, I've got two things going on here. I've got my little black book in front of me, and I've also got Maria Thun's diary as well. If you are interested, this is what I use. So I use Maria Thun's Biodynamic Calendar 2024. There are lots of other different moon gardening calendars that you can use. They sometimes work with just the waxing and the waning moon. They also work with the celestial stuff, which is what I do as well. And it varies quite a lot. So whatever you use, and if it works for you, then fantastic. So let's get back to Monday. Monday, the 29th of April, and Tuesday morning, the 30th of April, are still fruits days. So I mentioned in my last video that today was a fruits day as well, Sunday. So Monday and Tuesday morning are fruits days. And I'm just going to recap on what I have been doing today and what I'm going to continue doing. And it might give you some ideas as well. So sowing, okay. So if you've got any peas that you want to sow, I particularly like the Oregon Sugar Pod, and I also like Sugar Snap peas as well. But if you want to do any kind of podding peas, probably the later ones, don't go for really early ones now. Go for something like, if you're in the UK, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, go for something like Terrain, go for something like Hurst Green Shaft. I can't think of anything else, but while I keep talking, I'll keep thinking. Something like that has a longer pod of podding peas, then they will work really well now. The earlier ones like Meteor, which I've got in my pots outside my greenhouse, are good, but they're not, they're tasty, but not hugely tasty. Another one that also is quite good for early and mid is Kelvedon Wonder. That's a pretty good one as well. So you can sow some peas. I never sow direct into the ground, because I don't want critters to eat my peas, and I don't want my peas to rot before they even come up. So I always sow in modules, even at this time of year. So that's peas. Sowing squash. So you can get your main crop squash in now, or pumpkins, or if you want to call them winter squash as well. That's a really good idea. So I'll give you a rundown of the varieties that I particularly like. The little ones that I like are called Sweet Dumpling and also Jacoby Little. Then I start doing my big ones now. I never do squash early because I find that they don't do well if they have to sit around in pots, and they're not going to go out until the mid to end of May. They grow really fast. So that's why I start them now, end of April, beginning of May. So I like a squash called Iran. I got it from Baker Creek Seeds. It is fabulous. If you're over in the States and you get Baker Creek Seeds, then look out that one. That's a great one. Queensland Blue, of course, I love it. It doesn't do as well as it does in Australia, but it's still a great pumpkin. Delica, that's a beautiful little pumpkin as well, and it has gorgeous flesh on the inside. So they are kind of, and also Crown Prince. I'm never without any Crown Prince, because here in the UK, Crown Prince, I think, is probably the best big size pumpkin that you can get. I don't bother with things like butternut squash. I mean, butternut squash, of course, go for it. I don't bother with things like that. I don't bother with the little ichikuri ones. I don't bother with that, because I find that the flesh on those it's a very, very thin flesh, and it's not enough for me. So don't bother with those. The next thing that you can sow is melons. If you have anywhere that is sheltered, or anywhere that you can cover, or a greenhouse or a polytunnel, try some melons, because you will be really surprised at how well they do here, especially in the UK. I am zone 8, and they do really well, but they need to be undercover, because the weather is just not predictable enough. So the melons I recommend are a honeydew. If you want to try a watermelon, Sugar Baby has got quite a good interest, I would say, if you want a watermelon that has a red interior. The one I always recommend is called Champagne. It's got an orangey yellow interior, and it's delicious, and it does really well here in the UK. The other melon you can do is Emir, EMIR. It's an F1. It does really well. You can get grafted plants of those. That does really well here. My Minnesota Midget, I love those. It's a great melon you can do. They're only small, so they don't take long to really grow and get away. And the other one that's quite an interesting one is called Malaga as well. The other thing that you can be sowing is some sweet corn. Don't worry if you don't sow them now, tomorrow or Tuesday morning, because you're not late with sweet corn. Again, sweet corn, once it gets germinated and gets off and goes, it really needs to not sit in the pots for a long period of time. That's why I always do mine in root trainers, because the roots have got some room at least. If you are going to put them in pots or small modules, wait a little bit longer and do them in May, and then they will get off better. So the variety that I particularly like is called Incredible. It's a great variety. Again, it's an F1. So my last lot of tomatoes to sow as well. If you want to sow tomatoes for outside, and I say this with a little bit of a hesitation, because the year that we're having so far, with so much dampness and wet, and then if we start to get humidity as well, we're going to have problems with blight. So unless you sow a blight resistant tomato, just sow a lot, because you might lose them. But I'm going to give them a go, because I don't have enough room in the greenhouse for them. The ones that I am going to do for outside are Tigerella and Sun Gold. They're going to go outside, those two. The other ones that I have inside, San Marzano, I've got the honeycomb for my cordon, and I'm getting some grafted plants coming as well in May from Dobies, and they're the ones that I use for my cooking tomatoes. So the next thing you can sow is some beans. I have already sowed my second lot of climbing beans, my Cobra climbing beans, which will go in the greenhouse on the allotment. The first lot is in this big greenhouse. The next lot is on the allotment. You can now start to sow some dwarf beans if you want to. The two that I particularly like is a purple one called Amethyst, and another one called Sprite, a green one as well. Now, if you've got a polytunnel, put them in the polytunnel because they will absolutely love it and they will get away really, really fast. If you haven't got a polytunnel and you've got a greenhouse and you want to try a few plants, try them as well. But you can also put these ones outside when they're ready. So that's my beans. Cucumber. So my miniature cucumbers are all doing really well. The one that I like for, well, it's not outside. I don't put cucumbers outside. It's just, for me, it's a waste of time. I love this one called Passandra. It's a F1 and it's a great cucumber that does well for me, and I do that in the greenhouse over at the allotment. You can do some courgettes as well. By the time the courgettes get going, you might be able to, if you're a little bit more south than me, you might be able to put them outside as well. So that's my sowing that you can do on fruits days. Transplanting. If you have any melons that you've started and you want to transplant them, maybe put them in a bigger pot. So if you started them in really small modules or small pots, you can then upsize a pot. Any tomatoes, keep transplanting those until you need to put them in their final position. Peppers or chilies, same thing, keep transplanting them up into different pots, and any cucumbers as well for transplanting. So that is that. I just want to say something about that. A lot of people put their tender-ish plants in the greenhouse. So for instance, and they have been putting them in the greenhouse up until now, and I haven't. And the biggest reason I don't do that is they're not going to die. They won't die if you put them in the greenhouse. So if you put your cucumbers or your tomatoes or anything like that in the greenhouse, they're not going to die. However, with these temperatures, they're not going to grow. And the temperatures I'm talking about are nighttime temperatures. They're really, really important if you want to grow veg, because anything that stalls growing or stops growing is not good for the plant. It then takes more energy for the plant to then get going, and you'll get an even later crop. So what I do is, for anything that is tender, I keep it inside as long as I can. As long as it's growing and I can see it's growing, I keep it in here, and I'm watching the temperatures in my big greenhouse because that's my warmest greenhouse, and I'm watching the nighttime temperatures. Last night it got down to 8 degrees in the big greenhouse. It's not warm enough for me yet to be putting things out yet. So once I can get to steady 10 degrees Celsius and above, I then start putting things that are a little bit further along. Like I have some tomatoes that are quite further along. They'll go in there. Then I have a few peppers that are quite large. They'll go in there as well. But I never put anything in there that's small and that is still growing. If you can afford to do that and keep things inside as long as possible, then you will find that your growth rate through the season will be much better and you'll get much better harvests. A lot of people say that they start things early and then they still get late harvests, and I always blame it on putting things out too early, especially for nighttime temperatures. So that's my little thing about that. Okay, weeding and maintenance for fruits. Check all your fruit trees. Check your soft fruits as well. Check them for any pests, anything that might be going wrong with them. Leaf curl as well. I've got an almond tree and the leaf curl on that this year is just terrible. It gets leaf curl every year, but I pull the leaves off that has got the leaf curl. This year it is just out of control. I mean, if I pulled all the leaves off that had leaf curl, I'd have no leaves left. So I have to kind of hope for the best. Citrus as well. Keep feeding your citrus. They're now starting to grow. So they're starting to make shoots, starting to make leaves. They will then flower very soon. Keep feeding them as well. If you've got any peas outside, or if you've got broad beans, keep an eye on those as well. So that's feeding, weeding and maintenance. Now feeding, I'm feeding my peppers and my tomatoes and my cucumbers, and I am giving them a very, very weak feed of whatever I've got. So for my chili peppers and my peppers, I like to use Chili Focus. For my tomatoes, it doesn't really matter at this stage, just a multi-purpose or a seaweed. I've always got the seaweed. And then for cucumbers, exactly the same, just a multi-purpose. And it's very weak, and I just keep feeding. Every third or so water, I give them a feed. So that is your fruits days, Monday the 29th and Tuesday the 30th in the morning. Tuesday afternoon, the 30th of April, and Wednesday the 1st of May are roots days again on the moon phase calendar. So let's talk about what you can sow. If you want some leeks for end of autumn into winter and then into spring, sow some. That is a perfect time. Otherwise, we're going to start to get a little bit late. So sow some leeks. Now, choose a variety that is good for like autumn, they'll say autumn cropping. So the ones I like are Musselburgh, obviously. That's a really good variety. And the other one I like is a variety called Porbella, Porbella. That's a really good one. It's good for summer and it's good for late summer, autumn as well. So sow yourself a few leeks for main crop. This time of year, for anything like a brassica or a root, which we start to now go into main crop. And when I mean main crop, I mean the crop that is then probably going to take you through into winter and into late winter as well. So we're thinking that far ahead. And also, if it's a root crop, it's something that you're going to then store as well. Okay, so potatoes. This brings me to my next thing. You can start, the ground is warm enough now for you to put your potatoes directly into the ground. Of course, if they are completely sodden and you've got flooding, well, then that's not good at all. You might want to rethink how you grow potatoes if you've got that. Yucky. The guy next to me on the plot next to me on the allotment, his floods all the time. And I don't think he's put his potatoes in yet. He only grows potatoes he's got a tiny little plot and he only grows main crop potatoes, and I think he's still holding off. But I don't have to worry about that. So my main crop potatoes, I've done it already. So if you want to put in your main crop or even second early potatoes, put them directly into the ground. If you're a no digger, all you've got to do is make yourself a hole somehow. I use one of those bulb, the bulb planter things. I use one of those. I make the hole, pull it out with the plug, and then I put the potato in, and that's how I do my potatoes in the ground. The other thing you can sow direct now is carrots, and carrots now are going to be your kind of main crop. Early main crop carrots. So these carrots are now going to take you through to end of summer, beginning of autumn, mid-autumn as well. So again, think about your carrots and think about the varieties. Nice varieties of carrots are things like Touchon. Touchon is a really good carrot for this time of year, to grow at this time of year. So that's another thing that you can put in. Just remember that you need, if you've got carrot fly anywhere, and you'll know because carrot fly affects anything from the carrot, what is that called, that family? I'm sure everyone's yelling at me and telling what it is. Cruciferae, something like that. Anyhow, parsnips, parsley, carrots, all that kind of thing, carrot fly affects that. So if you've got any of that, then you'll have to cover with something, with a mesh or something. I always have to cover. I cover with the finest mesh, and they still get in. Not as bad, but they still get in. The other thing that you can also sow is beetroot. I never sow beetroot direct. I always sow it in modules, but if you want to sow it direct by all means. And that again is going to be your main crop beetroot that might even take you through to storing your beetroot. So that's that. And then also parsnips. It's not late to sow parsnips. You can sow parsnips in May. You can sow parsnips in June if you want to. It just depends on when you want to get them, have them. So you can sow parsnips as well. Now parsnips I always sow direct. I never sow them into modules, and I also never sow them, I never pre-germinate them as well. I sow them direct. So that's sowing for root stays. The next thing is transplanting. If you have anything that you need to prick out, like celeriac, if you're growing celeriac, if you even know what celeriac is. So celeriac is a root, a big bulbous root with leaves on it that look like celery. That's what celeriac is. If you're growing things like transplanting and other things, like I've got oca plants as well. And oca is a tuber that is really delicious. It has like a lemon taste to it. You can transplant those on. Now, oca is not frost hardy, so you can grow it outside in the summer, but then you have to bring it in if you want a good harvest. And I always put it in pots. And also, if you want to transplant, if you've got onions that you want to transplant out, you can still put sets in, no problem. Or if you have onions that you grew from seed as well, they can also go out now. Weeding and maintenance. So I have onions already on the allotment, some red onions, and they're also got shallots in the same bed. It's a very long bed. I have red onions on one end and I have shallots at the other. I noticed the other day that needs a weed, but I always wait until a root stay so I can open up the mesh and weed it. And I've got mesh on top of it because of allium. It's amazing, isn't it? If it's not one thing, it's another. I cover everything, because there are so many pests nowadays that if I didn't cover it, I'd get nothing. So allium leaf miner, an interesting thing, very interesting. If you are interested in what allium leaf miner is, I'm going to put a link below for I have a garlic guide of how to grow garlic, and in there I talk about allium leaf miner, and I'll put a link below so you can just have a look and see what that dreaded thing is. But you have to net everything. But I will open the netting and I will have a look at my shallots and my red onions. I have beetroot in 2 places. So I have beetroot in the greenhouse on the allotment already. It looks beautiful. I only put it, you don't have to put it in that early, but I wanted some really lovely little fresh beetroots to do in salads. So that's why they're in here, there. And I also have some here in the kitchen garden just below me. I have 4 varieties. So I've got a white, I've got a golden, I've got a red, I've got 2 reds actually in here at home. So radish, I'm going to do one more sowing of radish actually. I should have said that in my sowing. I'm going to sow just a few extra seeds in my veggie pod because I just want a few more radish. Leeks, I still have got leeks in the garden and they're not going to seed, and it is because I chose a particular variety. The variety that I chose was Jolant, and they don't tend to go to seed like others, so I've still got it in the garden. It looks great. I've got maybe about 15 left. Carrots. So if you've got any carrots on the go in pots or in troughs or anything, just give them a look over and see how they're doing. Make sure they're not getting any kind of mildew, especially if you've got them under cover. If you've got them under cover, they might be getting a little bit mildewy. Think about bringing them out maybe, and maybe covering them with a mesh as well. And of course, garlic. It's a great time now to have a good look over your garlic. See what it looks like. It probably will have yellow leaves. If it has, give it a feed. I don't care what you feed it with, just give it a feed. Preferably not tomato feed or a high phosphorus feed. Phosphorus, whatever. Yeah, don't do that. Just give it a multi-purpose, or if you've got chicken pellets or you've got whatever, just give it a feed, because now they start to make bulbs at the bottom. First of all, they make these long leaves, and then the leaf stalks get thicker and thicker and thicker. And then once they've reached the thickness they want, they then start putting the energy into the bulbs. So now is an important time for that. Again, all of my garlic is covered here at home. I've got all my garlic here in the kitchen garden because the allium leaf miner isn't as bad over here. It's all covered with double mesh, and it's looking pretty good. I had a look at it last week. Okay, and then feeding, nothing. I don't need to feed anything really. So that then takes us to Wednesday, the 1st of May. Exciting. So I will be bringing out, the next few days, I will be bringing out my What to Sow in May video for you all. May, I start to slow down a little bit actually. April is my February, March, April are my busiest months for sowing. May, I start to slow down a bit because everything is doing well. I'm thinking more ahead towards what's going to go on later on in the year and into winter in May. So yeah, you'll see that when that comes out. So thank you for watching. I hope you have a good few days. I hope the weather is nice with you. I hope you're able to get out and garden. I hope that you're gardening by the moon. That's exciting as well. And I will see you next time. Thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button and you will get my videos. I released just now a vlog of what I did for the week, and I will see you next time. Okay, bye.